Douglas Frank, AAAPG.net, clearjustice.org, waves in support. Oh, I'm sorry, waves in opposition. Oh, he's here. I'm sorry. You're recognized, sir.
Yes, I am here. Thank you very much for your time today. And I want to say there's always someone that I find in the House or the Senate that is somebody that's special. You're someone special. I can't see your name, but you spoke out earlier. And Mrs. Henson, Representative Henson, somebody special. The guardianship in Florida, y'all need to watch one of the bills that was just come out, and I had to speak, and the lady tells me, Garcia says, you have 2 minutes. I'm walking up. You have 1 minute. You have 30 seconds. I got a little upset. I got real upset, and they were about to throw me out. You know, I'm an American. I lived in Florida for 21 years, and I came back all the time to free my mom out of an abusive, illegal, unconstitutional guardianship. The guardianship laws and the situation in Florida is abysmal. And to seal some records, I know a man named David Cunningham. He was in Georgia. They moved him down to Florida, to Escambia County, to hide him. His records are now sealed. Really? This is a sunshine state. We should have the laws that allow light on these things. Do not change it. Do not allow this to be sealed. These records need to be public, and there needs to be investigations. And again, I want to make this real clear. I have video of 3 people that interviewed my mom. I have my mom, Ernestine Franks, 2 months after she's been put into a guardianship because she's totally incapacitated. My butt, okay? She's not totally incapacitated at all. You'd be impressed to meet this woman, and one of the best gifts I could give anybody here today or in the world is to meet my mom. She was an incredible woman, Ernestine Franks, freeernestine.com. So with that said, I just want to say that Hillary Hogue was also on the task force. She's against this. Rick Black, which is with SEER, Sam Sugar, which started AAAPG, Beverly Newman, which her dad was in a guardianship after he got back from Germany and was a Holocaust victim. You know what he said? She told me that her dad told him the guards in the Nazi concentration camps, the worst ones were the women. And for me, that blew my mind because I think, man, my mom is so kind, sweet. And again, I know we have all this thing, we're all equal. But my book, men are designed to fight and to protect women, and women's jobs are to nurture and to develop good men and daughters. And that's kind of the way I see stuff. But again, any of y'all that had a child or a son, I'm sure you wish you had somebody like me that would fight for you, because my mom's gone since 2016. She's dead. She's gone. But she lives on in my life forever. And if I'm 95 in a wheelchair coming up here, I will do that to stop these guardianship atrocities. I wish you would consider abolishing guardianship and starting all over again, because right now it's a moneymaker and no one wins except for the attorneys. And I know, I hate to say it, but the only reason why it's still going is people are being bought off. Campaign funds or whatever the case may be. You got to commit political suicide, I guess, and stand up and be a man or be a woman and say, you know what, this is wrong, and I'm not going to be part of it. So what if leadership isn't for it? If you have leadership that's for guardianship, then you have poor leadership, and that leadership needs to go. Thank you very much for your time. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Bartleman, do you have a question? I didn't see your hand. You're recognized. Sir, would you mind taking a question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, because you presented in My Children and Families, and I was like, I read everything about what happened with your mother. Would this bill, the way this bill is written, would that have hurt your chances? Because in the end, I know you prevailed, but then she only lived 6 months or something. So I'm sorry about that. So would this bill have hurt your ability to fight that case to get your mother away from them?
You're recognized.
I'm an exception. All these people I know that their mothers, that they have Ernestines and Ernies and everything else. We need every advantage we can get to do research and to see what is going on with any type of files, any type of video, anything. we are at a disadvantage. I mean, this is the David-Goliath fight. And I'm not saying that you guys are bad, you're the Goliath, but this system is the Goliath. Richard Prudhomme, we protested. We got to meet with him one day. He told me he would help me. He didn't. He didn't. And now we have a new person that's supposed to take over. I don't know. I just don't see much hope in this. So I'm just here to make a statement to maybe make somebody and compel them to think, I need to do the right thing. So that's my answer, and I don't know if it's a good answer, but that's how I feel.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we also have Rey Contreras. And sir, you're recognized.
Thank you. My name's Rey Contreras, and I'll start off by a famous speech. They say the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. With that being said, I've spoken to some of the people here. I've spoken to you. My mother found herself in Polk County with the best law firm she can afford, and she was in a mediation, and the man there, the attorney there, pulled out an assault rifle on her and her lawyers. And he was the court-appointed attorney who's also the registered agent for the same professional guardian. Now, we have affidavits that this happened. I mean, it's a complete travesty of justice. In the last 3 years, Florida has seen 3 different Secretary for Elders Affairs. 3 different ones in 3 years. I mean, DeSantis' own words were that there's no accountability when it comes to guardianships. At this point in time, this was the famous Rebecca Fierro case, where everyone in Tallahassee resigned. And then that's when Richard Prudhomme took over, and then we saw nothing from him. And now we have a new person, and her background is PR. And I'm afraid that, like Doug Frank said, that we're not going to see much more change. And what this man has been saying about these investigations, it's a complete joke. I mean, I filed a complaint with my family. Took over a year and a half. They never called us back. They never gave us updates. They haven't even interviewed the witnesses that we have. And these are medical providers. Finally, they reopened the case recently, and they're still doing the same thing. Just so we're on the record, there is a loaded gun in my mother's house that was given to my stepfather in an incapacitated state to hurt my mother. They're refusing to come to the house and collect the gun. I mean, what's happening in these guardianship cases is a complete abuse. It's a complete travesty. The fact that my mother was put in a mediation with a man with a gun, and we have 2 affidavits from her lawyers that went to the Florida bar, and the Florida bar sent me back a letter saying, we're not going to do anything. And just so people know, like, I've been working in the legal field for over 10 years, starting in Miami in the PI business. The very first death case I did was a nursing home abuse case. And I'll never forget the lawyers that walked in that room. They had gold everywhere. They had gold bracelets, watches, chains. They had no sympathy whatsoever for the victims and the families that were there that day because they lost their mother. So this is a complete racket. Those are my stepfather's last words to me was, Ray, find the biggest law firm you can find and stop this racket. And mind you, my stepfather, his name is Pete Beatty. There's a hospital named after him in Plant City with a helicopter because he wanted to help fellow farmers, get out of a situation where they got injured, out on the field. Well, when they finally found my stepfather after these guardianships took over, he had no food, no medicine, a broken hip. There were complaints by DCF, Adult Protective Services. They couldn't find him a nurse. This is a man worth $100 million. And the professional guardian through her company that had a realtor also listed on her LLC, as well as the court-appointed attorney, they just spent all the money and never got him the care that he deserved. They gave him no form of standard of care. So I completely disagree with this bill. I mean, I think this should be similar to what we do with DCF, where if we file a complaint with our kids, we have the right to call in and get an update. We have a right to meet with them again and give them more updates. The fact that there's a gun in my mother's house that was planted there to kill her, and these guys won't even go there and pick it up. I mean, that's how broken this is. And it's a complete shock. I can't believe somebody would even put up a bill like this to say, you know what? With so much abuse is going on in Florida, we're going to keep hiding these records. For what? We're just looking for transparency. We're looking for answers. And we need your support to block this bill. We need a whole lot more transparency, and we need to get this stuff together. We need to start asking questions like, how many is too many wards per professional guardian? Nobody wants to answer that. There could be 500, there could be 1,000. And going back to what a professional guardian is, it's someone who took a 40-hour certificate online. And that's not right. And, like I said, we were, I'm a Cuban American. I couldn't see my stepfather for the last 9 months of his life. They took out an injunction on my mother, an ex parte injunction that we never got our day in court. We never saw him again for 9 months. And the group that we're working with, we're talking on behalf of hundreds of families. There's wives losing their husbands. They can't see them again. And this shouldn't be happening. It's unbelievable. And we're just asking for the same honor that we give our children to give to our elders. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody have any questions?
Questions, members? Rep. Cheney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you feel that any of this personal information of the guardian or the ward, if in the wrong hands, could cause more harm to a ward?
No, we need all the oversight that we can. We need all the transparency that we can. We need to know what all the, kickbacks that these guardians are getting. We need to know, the fact that this professional guardian had the same court-appointed attorney on her LLC, the fact that she had the realtor on her LLC. Mind you, my stepfather was in a beautiful home, a beautiful nursing assisted facility where we knew a judge had his mom there. They moved them to this house that they bought through that realtor so they can make more money creating little jobs. So we can't trust someone who only has a 40-hour online course. How could we trust them with a $100 million estate? And that's what they did to my family. They fired all of us. They fired all the family members. All the trustees got revoked. All the beneficiaries got overturned. Everything got swapped. And guess who's the new personal representative to the estate? This court-appointed attorney that we've never met, that we've never hired. And millions were spent in legal fees. This should have never happened. We had all our documents in line. We had the healthcare surrogate. We had the guardian. This should have never happened, and we're currently fighting this in appeal. And this was Judge Stargell, for the record. And I'll go on the record that the reason that Judge Stargell got promoted to the appeals court was because I complained to the governor. I told the governor what Judge Stargell did, and now he's in the 2nd District Appeals Court, and now his wife wants to buy him a new courthouse for $50 million because the one in Pinellas County that was being built isn't acceptable. So, we shouldn't be part of this mafia state, and something needs to happen. And I'm going to keep fighting this every time you guys give me a moment to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Follow-up, Chair?
All right, briefly.
Briefly. So what I appreciate everything you're saying, and that's good information for us. But I've also heard that if the personal information of the ward, like the size of their estate, is out there publicly, that it could actually cause more predatory behavior against the ward.
I agree, but thank you. I agree, but what we're talking about here is the families are going from a 911 call, our loved ones in danger, to we won't hear from you for another 2 years. And that's what we don't want to happen. Of course, I agree that we should protect the financials. We should protect the medical records. But what he's talking about is that any of us call to complain, we'll never hear from his office for another 2 years. And then when we finally get the report, it's like the dumbest report you've ever seen in your life. They couldn't even get anything right. And it was all hearsay. It wasn't based on facts. They haven't interviewed any witnesses. They haven't done anything. In a normal case, you'd have subpoenas. You'd have interrogatories. None of that happened here. It's a complete hearsay asking the guardian, did you do something wrong? No? Okay, thanks. This is a report. It's unbelievable. And Florida statute is very clear that the court-appointed attorney cannot have any relationship with the guardian. So it's a clear violation of the law. And the other fact is that this court-appointed attorney was brought in after the fact. We had a court-appointed attorney for 6 months. And this Judge Stargell decided sua sponte, take him out and bring in his friend that he knew completely was working with that guardian because we found other cases where they worked together. So it's a racket, and it needs to stop.
All right, Rep. Bartleman. And sir, we really appreciate your testimony, but if you could keep it just to the public records exemption that's addressed in the bill and not necessarily, I know you've had a horrible experience with the process. We're not dealing with that today.
I understand. No,
Rep. Bartleman, you're recognized. Oh, okay. Ranking Member Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. In working with Representative Rizzo and with committee staff to try to narrow this exemption, I want to clarify something with you as someone who has direct experience with this. The existing public record exemption, which continues under this bill, says that what would be exempt from public record is, for example, personal identifying information of a complainant, of course, the person who files the complaint, or the ward, it also goes on to say all photographs and video recordings related to the complaint.
I don't agree with that.
If we narrow the exemption of the photographs and video recordings to instead be photographs and video recordings of the ward to protect them, but also to give us visibility into what the guardians are doing, and include language that opens up the opportunity for us to get information on the guardian, not the ward. We want to protect the ward, but that we still would be able to obtain information about the guardian. Is that what we should be moving towards as far as how the records exemption should be narrowly tailored?
In your opinion, you're recognized to answer.
Yes, as much information as that we can get from the guardian as far as, part of their investigation, we need that information as quickly as possible so we can save our loved ones, whether we need to take that information and go straight to the judge and bring it to his attention. But right now what's happening, it's a black hole. From the moment you call them, you'll never hear from them again. And the other thing that's important is that in this same article that came out in 2019, out of the hundreds of complaints that have been filed, not one of them was sanctioned, not one of them was punished. And the group that we're working with in Nevada, they had the April Parks case where they not only locked up the guardian, they locked up the attorney and all her accomplices. So again, this should be just like a child. If we call for help, they need to be available. They need to be talking to us. If we find new information, they should be receptive to that. And that's not what's happening.
All right. Rep. Hinson, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. So I'm back to my original question. With this bill, if you, being the family member, were allowed to have access to those records, would then this bill be acceptable?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Henson. Yes, it will.
Thank you.
All right. Rep. Joseph, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking the time to be here and share your unfortunate experience. And I know you stand for many more that are not here. My question for you, following up on the ranking member's question about how to tailor this legislation in a way that still provides access to the family members or other heirs that need to have access to this information. I'm not familiar with that area of litigation. I know that was you said the first case that you worked on. Is it useful to also have access not just to your particular family member's information, but to find pattern or practice, facts for discovery purposes? And how does that kind of litigation, or how would that kind of litigation be impacted by this bill as written in its current form?
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Joseph. That's a great question. In my research, I've discovered there's a new elderly fatality team experiment going on in Florida in District 5. And what it is what it sounds like. It's a group of lawyers trying to find out what went wrong in the death of an elder person, whether it was something regarding to the nursing home, the guardian, the hospital. There's so many things that can go wrong. But what's part of that elders fatality team is that, again, they want to seal those records. They want to have these experiments and this research and never let the public know what the shortcomings are. And that's really scary as a society that, we know there's a problem, yet we don't want the problems to be made public. And that's what we need to face. We need to face that as Americans, that we know this is hurting our parents and our grandparents, and we need to work as quickly and as effectively as possible to get that information out to protect them, because we're exposing them to people that really have no experience in caring for the elderly.
Further questions? Sir, we really appreciate your testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, we're in debate. Debate on the bill. Chair Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do appreciate the member of the public that came up to provide testimony and share the experiences that he and his family had. My heart goes out to you and your family. It sounds like it was a pretty tragic situation. What I will say, because this bill originated in the Government Operations Subcommittee, the majority of the testimony was not relevant to the subject of the bill. And so while I always appreciate and want people to come up and give testimony on the bill or on bills, the vast majority of what was said, which is true from the experience of the person who gave it is not actually relevant to the subject of the bill that you're voting on before you today. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear and that I intend to vote for the bill as it goes forward.
Ranking Member Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Representative Rizzo, for working with me on this records exemption. You know, 5 years ago is when the legislature enacted this public records exemption. A lot has changed in 5 years. The abuses within the guardianship system have been around for quite some time, certainly more than 5 years. But in the last 5 years, the public has been made aware of the abuses happening within the system. And I believe that your bill is an opportunity for us as a legislature to revisit that records exemption and narrowly tailor it in a way that helps us understand what's happening in the guardianship program and that protects the public's right to know. Now, the reason we're seeing so much interest is not just because of the infamous abuses from other guardians like Rebecca Fiarli and ones that have been reported in the media. The interest in exposing and reining in abuses within the guardianship program are because of two words: Free Britney. In California, they have something called a conservatorship. Conservatorship means guardianship in Florida. They are essentially the same thing. Only in Florida, unless you're rich, you know, for those who are not rich, who are not famous, who are lucky enough to have someone to advocate for them, they may have a voice. But for too many of those individuals who are trapped in guardianship, they do not have someone to advocate for them on their behalf. This records exemption in particular has received 122 requests over the last 5 years. We've seen about 470 complaints against guardians in the last 5 years. That verifies, for me, the tremendous public interest on this issue. Now, as it relates to investigations around the guardianship, much of the materials during an investigation are currently exempt from public record. We understand those investigations can last for several years, where family members wait for a long time to get the information related to that investigation. I've seen some of the results of those investigations too, where they publish the report and it's all black. It's all redacted. Here's how we can narrow this bill down, and I'll be very specific. The photos and videos related to the complaint should continue to be exempt if they are photos and video and audio of the ward. If it's photos and videos and audio recordings of the guardian, they need to be public record. And as it relates to information about the complaint, sure, we will continue to protect the personally identifying information, the financial information of the ward. Yes, absolutely. We need to protect the ward. However, the public needs as much information about these guardians as possible. They have a right to know, and it's more than just they would like to know, they need to know, they would prefer to know. They have a constitutional right to know. I voted yes for this bill in the first committee so that we can continue to work together. But until I see an amendment that really narrows the scope of the bill to take the public's right to know, their constitutional right, into consideration so that we can really substantially narrow this exemption, I'm going to have to be down on the bill. But I appreciate the opportunity to continue working with you, Rep. Rizzo, And thank you for bringing it forward.
Rep. Stevenson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Rizzo, this is debate. I apologize, but I would like some clarification if this is for all all the public records all the records we contain that regard to guardianship, because all guardians aren't paid. Some are unpaid guardians as well. I just want to say, I think my understanding of guardianship, I know there's some really bad actors out there. In 2020, we had a bill to reform that. We recently had a new secretary, I believe, a new leadership in the elder affairs area. But a public records exemption hardly seems to be the place to address guardian fraud, and access to records for an investigation are different than records that are available to everyone in the public. And I'm very concerned because there are a lot of very vulnerable people, very personal information, people that it should not, all their pictures and videos shouldn't be available because somebody wants to do an inquisition on it. This is like going in your grandma's bathroom and making videos available to the world. So I have great sympathy. And if we still have a fraud issue, an investigation issue, let's get on that. But a public records bill just doesn't seem to be the right place to address that. And I think it would open a lot of very vulnerable people's information inappropriately. So I am going to support this bill. I will also support people trying to resolve fraudulent issues regarding guardianship. We saw heard some terrible testimony on this a few years ago on the floor of the House. I believe it was 2020, Chair Burton had a bill on guardianship that seemed to target this kind of abuse. I heard the year 2019 mentioned. I'm going to be up on this bill. I'm very sorry for the stories we've heard here, but fraud is fraud and privacy is privacy, and they're just two different things. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Rep. Hinson, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for me, I'm not trying to make public any of these records. I'm trying to give loved ones, family members, bloodline access to evidence. I agree there should be some personal exemptions to this. However, the family members who want to protect their loved ones need access. That is my only concern. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Rep. Cheney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Mazzullo. Thank you, Rep. Rizzo, for bringing this forward. I don't know if you're aware, but I'm running a guardianship bill and a companion privacy bill with it. And we've been wrestling with all that's been discussed here and much more. And to Rep. Hinson, one of the sticky wickets is that a lot of times the abuser is the family member, is the closest blood member to the ward. So the privacy piece of my bill has gone through one committee. It is still being reviewed and may still be amended because it is so complex. And so I would ask of you, could you and I work together and make sure that our bills, one, don't conflict? And, maybe my bill, since it's a lot bigger, it's a companion to the Guardian bill, maybe my bill would take care of your bill. So would you be willing to work with me on that and staff and make sure we get this as right as we can?
You're recognized. Well, you're not recognized. Yeah, that was a question, Rep. Cheney. All right.
So I'll rephrase that. So I will be up on it today, knowing that you're a man of integrity and honesty, and that I trust that you'll work with me.
Further debate? Rep. Joseph, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sometimes we touch on one issue and it wakes up all these other issues. And while, it may not be directly everything that is related to the bill, we're here, so why not address it, right? So, you know, fraud is fraud and privacy is privacy, but not everybody's entitled to the same privacy to investigate the same fraud. So you've heard colleagues talk about access of records to the family. You've heard testimony about that, and you've spoken to Ranking Member Smith about this previously, and I really just want to underscore trying to figure a way to fix that. Because when the exemption was initially enacted, it had a natural sunset, which is what your bill is addressing. I understand it wasn't your bill, you know, all of that stuff was litigated previously, but they put that in period for a reason, for a reevaluation. And that's the point of us being here now, not to just rubber stamp something because it was done in the past, because they could have just made it a permanent exemption, but they chose not to do so. And the reason for that is to evaluate the impact, and we're hearing the impact. And I would encourage us as a body not to ignore the impact, to work out whatever you can with Representative Cheney, even with the sticky wickets that's going on there. You know, but we're talking about sticky wickets, but we're talking about real people. There's lots of abuse. To the members, I don't know if you all have seen this thing on Netflix, but it's called I Care a Lot. I encourage you to check out that film if you have not already. And we are in a position to do something about it. And I know you're dealing with a public records exemption, but it does impact it. So giving the family access to records is one thing. That's a component that we've underscored. I'm highlighting it again. But the second thing I want to highlight is, what is the rationale for protecting the non-private information of the guardians? So stuff that they can do, they can go in and do, you know, identity theft about, fine, protect that. But everything else, we should know what our guardians are doing with our wards. I think that is helpful information for the public to know. I think it's useful for people trying to decide what to do, and to add transparency to the process overall. So, you know, because the prior amendments have not been addressed that have been brought up in the prior committee, and this is the last committee stop before it comes to the floor. So we're running up on the end, and we're running out of session time. So I'm highlighting it. I'm going to vote down today just to highlight it. I know some people don't like people voting down, but it's my vote, and that's what people elected me to do, is to vote on the thing that's before me today. So I'm highlighting that in hopes that you would hear the voices of the people who've taken the time, the people who've died of abuse, and what it seems like a little thing, but having access to those records to figure out what's going on makes all the difference in the world sometimes. So with that, you know, people gonna vote how they vote, but you already know where I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Hinson, you're recognized in debate. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Anybody else? Rep. Woodson? No.
Thank you, Chair Matulo. And I have a question actually for Rep. Cheney before I even go to the.
We're in debate.
Based on what she mentioned, what her bill would be doing for the bill.
You can ask her that offline.
Okay. All right. I wanted to make sure to confirm, because last time you did tell me that you were going to work this piece out that we are debating, because I believe if a guardian took on the responsibility to care for a ward, and you know that you're doing things right, you should want to make it open, whatever information that they need, providing that is not personal, you know, this type of information that is not supposed to be put out. We are the voices for those wards, especially whether they have money or not. One life is too many, and we have had too many cases of abuse, elder abuse, which, you know, that's a population that I'm very passionate about. So I did give you my vote last time. Unfortunately, the part that you promised me, so I hope you understand, because this is something serious. Like my colleagues mentioned, this is a very serious topic. If I say that I'm going to be a guardian and I know that I'm doing right, anything, whatever the public want, I should be able to give them that information. So as people who are responsible to pass laws and also to be there for the people who put us in the job, we have an obligation to do that. And I was going to ask Rep. Cheney, would her bill, if she merged hers with yours, would that address the issue that we are talking about now? That was going to be my question. If that would address the part that we are talking about, then you would have my vote. Unfortunately, I cannot ask her now. I'm saying it, but I hope you understand.
Of course.
Okay. All right. Rep. Rizzo, you're recognized to close. I know you've heard from your colleagues as well as people from the public the concerns with your bill. And as you know, your next stop would be the floor if it passes this committee. I would think you would take that into consideration and address some of those issues on your close, if you could, and your willingness to perhaps look at a few exceptions once this bill gets to the floor. We want to protect the most vulnerable. We also want to protect those individuals that are acting in good faith, that they may not be abused by the general public as well. You recognize close.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time, and to the gentleman that came up, and both spoke about their personal issues. This is something that I started to take on, and I was educated on a lot of issues. And there's some champions here before me, and certainly, that aren't here present. And I'm committed to continue to work to make sure that we could make something better. And you're right, Representative Woodson, that's why we were elected. Representative Joseph, we have a voice, and the voices to our constituency and to the public in Florida in general. And to what the chair said, there are bad actors, absolutely, but think of all the people that are doing things that are right. And a lot of their information needs to be protected. It needs to be protected. This bill, while possibly not allowing for some information to be public while investigations are going on, it also protects those people that are doing right, the wards, the guardians themselves, from nefarious actors out there in the world. And we heard many different things, some of them being the family members. I would say that we should move forward with this bill. I will continue to work to make sure that before it hits the floor, if we can find some common ground and something that we can do to make this better, and I have been working on it, I just haven't been able to get that vehicle, correct up to now, Rep. Woodson. I will continue to do so before it does hit the floor, okay? If it passes committee today and if we're going to hear it. I will work with Representative Cheney to make sure that maybe that is the vehicle, the proper vehicle to put in some of the protections that we talked about today. And if we can put our heads together with some staff and see if we can allay some of these issues that have been brought up today. And so with that, I ask for your favorable support, and I close, sir.
Having closed on this bill, Lexi, please call the vote.
Representatives Altman,
Yes.
Bartleman,
No.
Buchanan,
Yes.
Campbell,
No.
Chambliss,
No.
Cheney,
Yes.
Drake, Fisher,
Yes.
Gilumbardo, Goff Marcel,
No.
Henson,
No.
Joseph,
Lo siento, no.
Mooney,
Yes.
Overdorf,
Yes, ma'am.
Payne,
Yes.
Rodriguez, Roth,
Yes.
C. Smith,
No.
D. Smith,
Yes.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Toledo, Woodson,
No.
Zika, Chair Masulo,
Yes.
15 yeas, 8 nays.
Members, by your vote will show HB 7017 reported favorably. Thank you for your willingness to continue to work on this bill.
Thank you, Chair.
Next up, members, we'll have HB 1497 by Rep. Duggan, City of Jacksonville, Duval County. Rep. Duggan, you're recognized.